Filthy animals like you don't belong here. The words exploded like gunfire on the marble steps of the Philadelphia Federal Courthouse, leaving the entire crowd frozen in shock. Those words came from a police officer sworn to protect justice. Judge Diana Clarke, 48 years old, had spent more than 2 decades serving as one of Philadelphia's most trusted federal judges. But on this day, she wasn't wearing her robe. There was no nameplate, no gavel, no visible authority. Just a tailored gray suit, a leather satchel filled with case files, and the calm confidence of a woman who had built her career on fairness and integrity. As she approached the courthouse steps, Officer Nathan Wheeler stood at the top, leaning against the railing with arms crossed. 17 years on the force had given him power, but also arrogance. He spotted Diana moving purposefully through the crowd and instantly decided she didn't belong. "ID," he barked, his voice harsh and commanding. Diana slowed, meeting his stare with quiet composure. "I'm Judge Diana Clarke. I work here. My credentials are—" She never got to finish. Without warning, Wheeler's open palm cracked across her face so hard that her head whipped to the side. The sharp slap echoed off the marble columns. Gasps erupted from bystanders. Diana's leather satchel slipped from her shoulder and crashed onto the steps, spilling legal briefs across the ground. Wheeler grabbed her arm roughly, twisting it behind her back until she winced in pain. "You don't belong here, filth!" he growled through clenched teeth as he forced her into handcuffs. Pain flared up her shoulders, but Diana's face remained calm. Her breathing controlled, her gaze unshaken. Inside, though, an old wound was bleeding. Memories flooded back. Her father profiled and humiliated in the 80s, her teenage nephew arrested at 14 for walking home from school, her own battles again, just a system she'd spent her entire life trying to reform. Officer Wheeler didn't care. He didn't ask questions. He saw dark skin, an unfamiliar face, and assumed guilt. 2 other officers approached, Benjamin Cole and Lauren Hole. "Got ourselves another trespasser," Cole muttered under his breath. The crowd began to murmur. Phones came up, cameras clicked. A few people gasped when they noticed the bronze plaque above the courthouse entrance engraved with the words, "The Honorable Diana T. Clarke, Presiding Judge." Her name, her courtroom, her authority. And yet, in this moment, none of it mattered. Diana forced herself to stay silent. Every fiber of her being wanted to speak, to scream, to tell them who she was, but she didn't. Not yet. She had prosecuted corrupt officers before. She knew exactly how this game worked. Every second she stayed quiet, Wheeler dug his own grave deeper. As Wheeler dragged Diana up the steps, the handcuffs cutting into her skin, people recorded from every angle. Some whispered her name, recognizing her, but no one dared intervene. Diana's eyes fixed on one young clerk standing near the doorway, Jasmine Carter, 25, holding a stack of files. Jasmine frowned, confusion etched across her face. She had seen Judge Clarke dozens of times in the courthouse halls. Why was she in cuffs? Diana caught her eye and gave the smallest nod, a silent message. Wait. Watch. Remember this. Inside Diana's mind was a storm. She wasn't thinking about pain anymore. She was planning, calculating. Every movement Wheeler made, every word he spat, every phone lifted by bystanders, it was all evidence. She thought of the courthouse security cameras she knew were rolling. Justice would come, not today, but soon. Wheeler shoved her through the courthouse doors and barked at the clerk behind security. Processing her for trespassing, possible stolen documents, hold her. Inside the Philadelphia Federal Courthouse, the air was thick with tension. Diana sat at the defendant's table, wrists still bound, the faint bruise on her cheek beginning to bloom under the harsh fluorescent lights. Across the room stood Officer Nathan Wheeler, confident, composed, and ready to perform. Judge Henry Sullivan, a temporary replacement covering morning hearings, leaned forward on the bench. He had no idea who Diana truly was. Wheeler cleared his throat. "Your Honor, this woman was behaving erratically on the courthouse steps. She refused to show identification, carried a satchel full of legal documents, likely stolen, and became aggressive when approached." His words flowed like a script he'd recited 100 times. Officer Benjamin Cole and Officer Lauren Hall sat nearby, ready to support his lies. "That's correct," Cole said, nodding when prompted. Hall's testimony matched Wheeler's perfectly, word for word, as though memorized. Prosecutor Abigail Foster stood at her table, flipping through paperwork as she built her case based entirely on their statements. She didn't question Wheeler. To her, this was routine. Another case. Another trespasser. Diana sat motionless, her face calm, her gaze steady. But inside her mind, 1,000 calculations were racing. Every word Wheeler spoke, she logged. Every contradiction, every overreach, every glance exchanged between him and his fellow officers, she stored it all away. Jasmine Carter, the young court clerk seated near the bench, couldn't hide her unease. She had seen Judge Diana Clarke in these halls for months, walking with quiet authority. None of this made sense. Judge Sullivan leaned back in his chair. "So, Officer Wheeler, to be clear, you're saying this woman refused to comply with a lawful order?" Wheeler straightened. "Yes, Your Honor. I requested identification several times, and she refused. She became hostile and attempted to conceal documents we believe are stolen from the clerk's office." Abigail Foster added, "Based on their statements, the state recommends holding her until we can verify her identity and investigate the origin of those documents." A low murmur ran through the gallery. Diana felt it. The weight of suspicion, the sting of humiliation, the bitter taste of injustice. But she didn't flinch. She knew better than anyone that patience could be more powerful than rage. Behind that calm exterior, Diana's mind was moving with precision. She remembered every security camera angle around the courthouse steps, and she knew something Wheeler had clearly forgotten. Since last year's reforms, every Philadelphia officer's bodycam automatically uploaded footage to a secure federal server in real time, preventing deletion or tampering. No malfunctions, no excuses. Every slap, every insult, every moment of abuse was already preserved in the cloud. Wheeler continued his testimony. "She became confrontational. At one point I feared for public safety and had no choice but to restrain her." Cole added, "That's right, Your Honor. She was loud, uncooperative, disturbing the peace." The performance was flawless, too flawless. Judge Sullivan finally turned to Diana. "Ma'am, do you wish to respond to these allegations?" Diana raised her head slowly, her calm gaze locking onto Wheeler. The room seemed to hold its breath. "No, Your Honor," she said softly, her voice steady, deliberate. "Not at this time." Wheeler's smirk returned. He thought her silence meant surrender. But Diana wasn't silent because she was powerless. She was silent because she knew she was holding the winning hand. "Court is in recess for 20 minutes, Sullivan announced. The heavy door of the holding room slammed shut behind her. Diana had endured humiliation on the courthouse steps, false accusations in the courtroom, and now she sat here in the very building where her name was etched on plaques. The door creaked open and Bailiff Marcus Tate stepped inside, his face pale, his voice trembling. "Judge Clarke, I didn't realize." Diana met his eyes, calm but firm. "Marcus, listen to me carefully. I need you to go to my office right now. Bring me my judicial robes and my gavel, the mahogany one engraved with Truth Prevails." Marcus hesitated. "Judge, if Wheeler sees me—" Marcus, trust me, do it. He swallowed hard, nodded, and slipped out. Diana took a deep breath, pulling her phone discreetly from her jacket pocket. She dialed a secure line, and within seconds, the commanding voice of Chief Judge Charlotte Ramsey answered. Charlotte, listen. Wheeler assaulted me on the courthouse steps. I need you to secure every second of security footage from 8:30 to 9 o'clock a.m. Pull the uploads from the body cams, too. Every angle, every file. No one touches it. A beat of silence. Then Charlotte's voice hardened. Consider it done. And Diana, are you okay? I'm fine, Charlotte, but this ends today. Outside, Marcus hurried through the corridors, retrieving Diana's robes and gavel from her office. He moved quickly, hiding them beneath a plain courthouse storage bag. Back in the holding room, Diana closed her eyes briefly. Images of her father flashed through her mind, the day he was stopped by police for fitting a description. She remembered her nephew Jamal's terrified face when he was arrested at 14 for walking home through a wealthy neighborhood. But Diana wasn't broken. She wasn't angry. She was focused. Her grandmother's voice returned like a whisper. Justice is your shield, but truth is your sword. The door opened again, and Marcus slipped inside without a word. He set the storage bag on the table. Diana reached inside and pulled out her black silk judicial robes, the fabric smooth beneath her fingertips, heavy with meaning. Then she lifted the polished mahogany gavel, tracing the engraved words, Truth Prevails, with her thumb. Thank you, Marcus, she said quietly. From this moment on, not a word to anyone. He nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Meanwhile, Officer Wheeler leaned against a marble column, smirking as he spoke quietly with Officers Cole and Hall. She's probably begging for a deal in there. Once this is over, she'll think twice before showing up here without ID. Across the hall, Jasmine Carter approached Marcus slowly. Is it true? She whispered. That's Judge Clarke? Marcus hesitated, then leaned closer. Keep it to yourself for now. But yes. And she's not done yet. The courtroom buzzed softly as the 20-minute recess ended. Rumors had spread like wildfire through the courthouse halls. Then the double doors swung open and silence rippled through the room as Judge Diana Clarke stepped inside. No longer in her gray tailored suit, but in the flowing black judicial robes that carried the weight of authority. Her polished mahogany gavel rested firmly in her hand. Officer Wheeler leaned casually against the railing, still smirking, whispering something to Cole under his breath. He hadn't noticed the robe. He hadn't understood the shift. But the bailiff did. Marcus Tate stepped forward, his voice booming across the room with deliberate force. All rise! The Honorable Judge Diana T. Clarke presiding. The words cracked through the silence like lightning striking dry earth. Gasps erupted from the gallery. Prosecutor Abigail Foster froze mid-step. Jasmine Carter dropped her pen onto the desk. Judge Henry Sullivan's jaw went slack. Officer Wheeler blinked, his smirk faltering as if his brain refused to process what he was hearing. Diana moved with steady, deliberate grace, ascending the 3 marble steps toward the bench. Each click of her heels echoed like a drumbeat of authority. Without hesitation, she placed her gavel on the polished oak surface and took her seat. Then she lifted her gaze, locking eyes with Wheeler for the first time since the slap on the courthouse steps. Officer Wheeler, she began, her tone measured, deliberate. You testified under oath that I trespassed, that I resisted, that I attempted to conceal stolen documents. Is that correct? Wheeler's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Yes, Your Honor. Diana's eyebrows lifted just enough to betray the faintest trace of irony. Your Honor, she repeated softly, letting the title hang in the air like a trap snapping shut. She gestured toward the large courtroom monitor. Let us review the evidence. Marcus, already prepared, dimmed the lights as the high-definition security footage from the courthouse steps filled the screen. The video began to play. The crowd leaned forward as they watched Wheeler's hand crack violently across Diana's face. The sharp sound captured perfectly by the mic. Gasps filled the room as her leather satchel tumbled to the marble steps, papers scattering like leaves in the wind. The words followed, brutal and undeniable. "Filthy animals like you don't belong here." The silence in the room turned heavy, suffocating. Abigail Foster's hand flew to her mouth. Jasmine Carter's trembling fingers covered her lips. Wheeler's face drained of color. "That video it's incomplete," he stammered weakly, but Diana didn't respond. Instead, she signaled again and another file appeared. The bodycam footage uploaded automatically to the federal cloud. This time the audio was crystal clear. Wheeler's every insult, every threat, preserved forever. "Officer Wheeler," Diana said softly, her tone steady but sharp. "You swore under oath that you acted lawfully, that I resisted, that your bodycam malfunctioned. The evidence disagrees." Wheeler's breathing grew shallow, his confident facade collapsing piece by piece. Diana leaned forward slightly. "Perjury, assault, civil rights violations, abuse of authority, all captured, all preserved, all undeniable." A stunned hush blanketed the room. Then slowly the murmurs began, growing. Reporters in the back scrambled for their phones. Diana raised her gavel slightly, bringing the chaos back under control with a single sharp strike. "Order in this court." "Officer Wheeler," she said slowly, her voice deliberate and final. "Your testimony has been proven false, your conduct unlawful, and your actions today disgraceful." She gestured toward the officers seated beside him. "Officers Cole and Hall, I strongly suggest you reconsider your testimonies while you still can." Cole's lips parted, his eyes darting nervously around the room. I just followed his lead," he muttered. Hall nodded stiffly, tears brimming in her eyes. "This court will reconvene shortly," Diana announced. "Until then, Officer Wheeler, you are ordered to remain in custody pending further investigation." The bailiff moved quickly, stepping behind Wheeler, whose hands twitched slightly at his sides. The crowd erupted again, phones raised, whispers flying. When the courtroom doors reopened, the energy inside was electric. Everyone in the room knew exactly who she was. Her presence radiated authority, her black robes flowing like armor. Diana lifted a thick folder from her bench. "Before we proceed, this court has reviewed the preliminary findings from the Department of Justice regarding your service record." A ripple of murmurs swept through the gallery. "Officer Wheeler, you currently have 62 citizen complaints filed against you during your 17 years on the force. Of those 62, 48 involve allegations of racial profiling, excessive force, and unlawful detainment, overwhelmingly targeting people of color." Wheeler's lips parted as though to respond, but no sound came out. "Out of the 1,392 arrests you've made, 81% involve non-white individuals. Despite Philadelphia's demographic makeup being 44% black, statistical anomalies lit. This do not happen by coincidence, Officer Wheeler." She placed several documents on the overhead projector. Audible gasps rippled through the gallery as the statistics told a story of patterns too obvious to ignore. "Let us review some of the cases. Case number 1, Mrs. Dorothy Evans, age 68, stopped for a broken tail light and hospitalized after you fractured her wrist during what should have been a routine traffic stop." A woman in the gallery let out a muffled sob at the mention of Dorothy Evans's name. Case number 12, Jamal Hayes, 16 years old, wrongfully accused of theft at a downtown electronics store. Video evidence later cleared him entirely, and yet you had him handcuffed on the sidewalk for 47 minutes. Case number 29, Dr. Caleb Turner, an emergency room physician, detained outside his own home because, as you claimed, he didn't look like he belonged in that neighborhood. He was arrested in front of his 6-year-old daughter. Abigail Foster shifted uneasily at her table, her earlier confidence dissolving with every name, every statistic, every documented abuse Diana laid bare. Wheeler's defense attorney stood suddenly. "Your Honor, these incidents are unrelated and prejudicial to this case." Diana turned her gaze toward him. "Counselor, this is not character evidence. This is pattern evidence. This court has an obligation to examine the systemic abuse tied directly to today's allegations. The people deserve the full truth." The attorney hesitated, then lowered himself back into his seat. "Officer Wheeler," Diana said, her voice dropping into a low, deliberate register, "this is not just about one slap, one insult, one wrongful arrest. This is about a pattern of behavior so pervasive, so deliberate, that it can no longer be ignored. 62 complaints, 48 involving people of color, 612 dismissed cases tied directly to your arrests. This court will not turn away from the truth." Murmurs surged through the gallery, and Diana struck her gavel once, restoring order. "For too long, misconduct has been buried beneath bureaucracy. Cases dismissed quietly, complaints ignored, victims silenced. That ends here." Wheeler shifted violently in his seat, but Diana cut him off. "And let me be very clear. This is no longer just a courtroom matter. Effective immediately, this case will be referred to the Department of Justice for a full federal investigation." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Reporters scrambled to capture every second. "Officer Wheeler, the evidence against you is overwhelming. This court has no choice but to order your immediate suspension from duty. Pending the outcome of this investigation, you will surrender your badge and firearm to the bailiff before leaving this courtroom." Marcus Tate stepped forward as Wheeler hesitated, his breathing ragged. He slowly unclipped his badge, placing it in Marcus's palm, the metallic clink ringing through the silent courtroom. "This court," Diana said softly, her voice even and resolute, "stands for the people. And the people deserve justice." The gavel came down with a sharp, decisive strike, its sound reverberating through the chamber. When the court reconvened, the atmosphere was unlike anything the city had seen in decades. The gallery was packed wall to wall, reporters lined up with cameras ready. Diana scanned the courtroom slowly. "This court has reviewed the evidence. We have examined sworn testimony, bodycam footage, courthouse surveillance, and verified federal records. Officer Nathan Wheeler, this court finds you guilty of felony assault, assault on a judicial officer, civil rights deprivation, abuse of authority, and perjury under oath." The words landed like thunder. Gasps erupted from the gallery. Wheeler sat motionless, his once defiant posture crumbling. "The actions of this officer were not isolated, they were part of a deliberate and consistent pattern of abuse spanning 17 years. This court cannot and will not allow this level of misconduct to be ignored any longer." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "It is the judgment of this court that you are hereby sentenced to 30 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery, followed by a stunned hush. Some cried quietly, others nodded, tears streaming freely. A woman in the second row clutched her chest, whispering, "Finally, finally." Wheeler shook his head slowly, his body sagging forward. 30 years, he whispered hoarsely. "Yes, Officer Wheeler," Diana said firmly. 30 years. She struck her gavel once. "This court orders the Department of Justice to immediately conduct a comprehensive review of every arrest, every detainment, and every use of force report filed by Officer Wheeler throughout his career. Over 600 cases tied to this officer will be reopened. Every wrongful charge will be dismissed. Every victim will have their name cleared." A low murmur of relief swept through the room. Dorothy Evans held her daughter's hand tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. Jamal Hayes sat rigid, his eyes locked on Wheeler with quiet vindication. Dr. Caleb Turner exhaled deeply, closing his eyes as though releasing years of unspoken pain. To the victims sitting here today, this is not the end. This is the beginning of accountability. You were failed by the system designed to protect you. But today, this court acknowledges your pain and your courage. This court further orders the Philadelphia Police Department to undergo an independent federal audit into its policies, procedures, and complaint handling mechanisms effective immediately. This court is appointing an oversight committee led by the Department of Justice to implement mandatory reforms. Wheeler sat hollow-eyed, staring blankly at the table. The man who once wielded authority over others now sat stripped of it entirely.
"No one,"
Diana said softly, her voice, cutting through the silence like glass, "is above the law, not even those entrusted to enforce it." Marcus stepped forward, flanked by 2 federal marshals. "Badge and weapon," he said firmly. Wheeler hesitated, his hand trembling as he surrendered his service pistol. As Marcus stepped back, Wheeler slumped in his seat, tears rolling silently down his cheeks. Diana struck her gavel a final time. Court is adjourned. 8 months later, the Philadelphia Federal Courthouse looked the same on the outside, but inside, everything had changed. The Department of Justice's investigation had concluded. 19 officers were terminated for misconduct. 7 were federally indicted. Over 600 cases tied to Wheeler's arrests were reopened, and 342 wrongful convictions were overturned. The city approved a $14.8 million settlement fund to compensate victims. New federal oversight committees were established. The Philadelphia Police Department began mandatory cultural sensitivity training. Every officer now wore upgraded body cams with live streaming capabilities permanently connected to a secure DOJ cloud. Inside the courthouse, Jasmine Carter walked briskly through the marble halls, her DOJ credentials clipped to her blazer. Inspired by Diana's courage, she had joined the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. She paused briefly outside a newly mounted plaque. The Clarke Justice Center, named in honor of Judge Diana T. Clarke for her unwavering dedication to truth, justice, and equality. Across the city, Diana's face had become synonymous with courage and accountability. She had testified twice before the Senate Judiciary Committee, her insights shaping new federal policies. Her speech at Howard University streamed live to over 6 million viewers. Yet despite her rising influence, Diana remained grounded. She still walked the courthouse halls daily, still handled cases. She still listened to every victim with the same patience she had carried since her first day on the bench. The nightmares still came sometimes. The slap on the courthouse steps, the humiliation of sitting cuffed at the defendant's table. But every time those memories surfaced, she reminded herself why she fought. For her father, profiled in the 80s. For her nephew, arrested at 14. For every Dorothy Evans, every Jamal Hayes, every Dr. Caleb Turner whose dignity had been stripped away by unchecked power. Meanwhile, deep inside a federal prison 300 miles away, Nathan Wheeler sat alone in a small concrete cell. His once proud uniform was gone, replaced by a faded orange jumpsuit. The man who had once wielded authority through intimidation now woke every morning to the clang of metal doors. At night, he lay awake, haunted by memories of his trial, by the sharp sound of Diana's gavel declaring his sentence. Back in Philadelphia, life moved forward. Dorothy Evans used part of her settlement to open a free legal aid center. Jamal Hayes received a full scholarship to Temple University, dedicating his studies to criminal justice reform. Dr. Caleb Turner launched a nonprofit organization providing mental health counseling to families traumatized by racial profiling. In March, a historic ceremony was held on the courthouse steps where it all began. Hundreds gathered as the mayor unveiled the new plaque renaming the building the Clarke Justice Center. Diana stood at the podium, her black robes flowing softly in the spring breeze. 8 months ago, she began, her voice steady and clear. I walked these same steps as I had many times before, but that morning was different. That morning I was not seen as a judge. I was not seen as a woman with authority. I was seen only as a threat. What happened here did not just happen to me. It happened to every person who has ever been silenced, dismissed, or humiliated because of who they are or what they look like. Her voice wavered slightly just for a moment before her resolve returned. But this is not a story about humiliation. It is a story about resilience. It is a story about truth, and it is proof that justice can still prevail if we are willing to fight for it. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras panned across the faces of Dorothy Evans, Jamal Hayes, Dr. Turner, and countless others whose lives had been reshaped by what began on those steps. That evening, national news outlets carried the story across every screen. Her words sparked conversations in homes, schools, and workplaces across the country. In the years to come, law schools would study her rulings. Advocacy groups would cite her case in legislation. Communities far beyond Philadelphia would replicate the oversight model born from this courtroom. As the sun dipped below the courthouse columns that night, Diana walked down the steps slowly, her hand brushing the new plaque bearing her name. She paused for just a moment, listening to the hum of the city around her, the voices of people laughing, talking, living freely. Then she smiled faintly, whispering the words that had guided her through every trial, every battle, every injustice she had faced. Justice is my shield, but truth will always be my sword.